Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
With KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, August 19th. I'm Soreath Hok. The future of transportation funding is on the line in Fresno County. The dispute has fueled a battle beyond the local level.
So ultimately, the county did file a lawsuit against the state.
Coming up, we have an extended conversation with the Fresnoland reporter about where a sales tax fight stands now and what's next. But first, these headlines. A Fresno Unified School Board member says she will not resign after a teachers' union made a public call this week for her to step down. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado has this report.
The Fresno Teachers Association said in a surprise statement this week it has lost trust in school board trustee Keisha Thomas. Thomas is currently involved in a legal battle with a former high school football coach. Years ago, she accused the coach of using a racial slur against her son. The coach later denied the accusation and sued Thomas for defamation. Now, Thomas's own son has said the coach never said the slur. Thomas issued a public apology to the coach on Monday night following the revelations, but attorneys for the coach dismissed it as a PR move. Thomas also dismissed a call to step down by the union. She called it a, quote, political demand. Thomas is also running for the Fresno City Council. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
California legislators added billions to education funding this year, and it's helping Fresno Unified pay down its debt. Our newsroom partner EdSource reports the funding helped the Fresno Unified School District cut its debt from $59 million to $23 million. The state's third largest district eliminated hundreds of positions this year and is still running a deficit. Enrollment is declining, while costs in some categories, like special education, are rising significantly. A country music singer in Bakersfield is leading an effort to preserve a historic landmark. A petition is circulating online to save the historic Buck Owens Crystal Palace. The music venue closed last August after nearly 30 years. The effort is led by Scotty Crabtree, who performed at the historic venue for years. He started a petition that asked the city of Bakersfield to explore ways to preserve the venue rather than risk losing it forever.
August 31st is the last day to enter KVPR's $10,000 drawing. Your $100 ticket purchase supports KVPR and gives you a chance to win $10,000. Only 800 tickets will be sold. Thanks to Fresno Mazda for providing the $10,000 grand prize. Second place is a 2-night stay at Pismo Beach. Third place wins $250 to dine at restaurants in your community. But time is running out. The deadline is August 31st. Enter now at kvpr.org/10K.
And now to our main story. The fight to secure transportation funding in Fresno County is the summer blockbuster drama no one saw coming. The plot twists in the effort to place a sales tax on the November ballot have been dizzying, with multiple last-minute developments happening within days or hours of each other, and each running up against crucial election deadlines. Most recently, a state law mandated that a county tax to fund transportation projects be placed on the November ballot. Complicating matters more is that the city of Fresno appears to have its own tax measure headed to the ballot, too. If you've been following this story, you probably found it hard to keep track of everything. But to help us sort it all out, Julianna Morano, reporter from Fresnoland, joins me in the studio to tell us where this tax fight stands today. Welcome back, Julianna.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I've counted at least 9 different articles that you've published so far about this topic. You're definitely the right person to talk to. Before we get into more details of all the back and forth, can you talk about why these proposals have been under consideration to begin with?
So I think the critical deadline coming up, that's kind of the reason all these fireworks are happening right now in late summer, is because next year in June, Measure C is going to expire. And that's a long time tax that's been in place in Fresno County, funding all different kinds of transportation projects from highways to road repairs. And, it helps the county get more state and federal dollars for transportation projects too. November is the last opportunity for people here to get voters to approve a new plan before it expires next year. So this election is really decisive for whether we're going to have a Measure C extension or not.
Yeah, November, that is down to the wire. And with the expiration of this Measure C, something called the Better Roads, Safe Streets initiative came to the forefront as a replacement. So I'm wondering, what's different about the way that this measure was drafted versus Measure C?
So in some ways, we've seen this before with previous Measure C extension plans that have also been quote unquote citizen-led. But this particular extension effort, it did start with something called the Fresno Council of Governments. It's sort of this convening of all the individual cities of Fresno, plus the county Board of Supervisors and those electeds. And they work on this regional transportation planning. And so this discussion started there in terms of what the future of Measure C would look like. Then there was drama, I think, last year where several non-governmental groups that advocate for things surrounding transportation and that had done a lot of community outreach with residents, they wanted a seat at the table. They were given, I believe it was 12 seats at the table, but not all the electeds were happy with that. And long story short, talks were sort of stalled. So then the advocates of this measure, which does include a majority of the mayors in Fresno County, they splintered off along with these nonprofit groups that are in favor of this spending plan that they put together. And now they are the ones that are supporting Better Roads, that collected signatures to get it on the ballot. And that kind of brings us to where we are now. And one distinction there is that because it's a citizen-led rather than government-backed method for this transportation plan, that means it only needs 50% approval from voters, whereas government-backed would need 2/3, which is, of course, harder to pass.
And when it comes to these two measures, Measure C that is expiring and the replacement Better Roads, Safe Streets initiative, also known as Measure S, what is really the difference between the way these are funded?
One thing that's been discussed a lot and that some of the opponents of Better Roads have emphasized is the public transit spending component. But I do think it's worth noting that under the current Measure C plan that's set to expire, 25% of revenues are set aside for public transit. And that's actually the same as what's proposed in Better Roads. It would maintain it as 25%. I think a big difference is the amount of funding, that's dedicated to quote unquote, like major transportation projects. So like highways, road expansions, and so on. There was more money set aside for that in the Measure C that's about to expire versus this new one. On top of that, the Measure C that's in place right now, about to expire, also had a pot set aside that was a sort of flex funding that individual jurisdictions within the county, they had more of a say over how and what transportation projects they spent it on. This plan doesn't have that. So in terms of like the bristling at aspects of this new plan, I'd say that's an example of where some of that contention comes from.
And then things really started to get messy because the Better Roads, Safe Streets initiative gathered enough signatures to get on the November ballot, but it didn't get placed on the ballot. Can you tell us how that happened?
Yes. So there was a minimum number of valid signatures the clerk needed to validate within that 30,000+ that the campaign turned in. And so the campaign was hoping to pass a random sample test where the clerk doesn't have to count 21,000 signatures. They can just count like a subset of them. But because there was, I think it was 2 duplicate signatures within the random sample, it made it so they had to do the full count. And the timeline for the full count ended up playing out so that the supervisors did not get to do their statutory duty, their ministerial duty of accepting the validated signatures from the clerk and passing a resolution to say, yes, let's put this on the ballot. And they can't really say no to putting it on the ballot. It's a ministerial duty, but they just have to take that vote, give the clerk a resolution so that he can do his job and put together the ballot materials. Because the meeting where the supervisors did that ended up being, it was July 14th, the supervisors did have another option. They're allowed under, state law to call for an additional study of the economic impacts of this proposed measure before they take their obligated vote to put it on the next available ballot. And because they're allowed to have 30 days for that study, it put the conclusion of that study and the meeting when they'd be able to hear the results past the state deadline to get on the November ballot and submit those materials to the clerk. So critics of the Board of Supervisors, accuse them of deliberately leveraging that aspect of state law to purposely keep it off of the ballot.
Yeah, and it was delayed, like you said, because the supervisors wanted to study what kind of impacts it would have. And then in response, some local state representatives did make a proposal to the state legislature. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yes. State Assembly member and former Fresno City Council member Esmeralda Soria, alongside State Senator Ana Caballero, they drafted this state law in a very, this is all happening so fast. This law was introduced and passed over the course of between a Monday and a Thursday. And so Soria took an existing bill that she had introduced months prior that was actually completely unrelated. It was an extension of the distressed hospital loan program, which is something that benefited the Madera Community Hospital. So on a Monday, that language was completely scrapped and it became a new proposal that instead was written to require Fresno County officials to place any measure that had received, sufficient signatures by a date in early July, requiring them to place that on this November ballot. So basically, the only measure that applies under that language is better roads. So, and the state lawmakers have been open about how this was aimed at getting that proposal on the November ballot before Measure C expires next June because of the dire consequences that cities are projecting in terms of layoffs, lost funding if Measure C expires without a replacement.
So basically, the state stepped in and sort of circumvented that original decision where the county said, hey, stop, we need to get a study going first before we can place it.
Yes.
And the governor did sign it. It happened within days. So what happened after that? How did the county sort of respond to this state action?
So from the beginning of when that surprise law was introduced, county board leadership, particularly board chair Gary Bredefeld, was saying, we're going to fight this in court. And so ultimately the county did file a lawsuit against the state, their own elections clerk, the backers of Better Roads, and a handful of individuals designated as real parties in interest. And so they are alleging in this lawsuit that AB 1923 is unconstitutional. It's targeting Fresno County, even though they claim they were just following election law and that the state shouldn't intervene in this local matter that they have control over.
So now we have all this drama playing out in between Fresno County and the state, and then also Fresno County against other local leaders. In the meantime, in the backdrop, the city of Fresno, they also put their own proposal forward. Can you tell us about that, how that was in response to everything that was happening?
Of course. Because it was looking like after the Fresno County Board of Supervisors called for that 30-day study, before this last-minute intervention from the state, when it was looking like there was no way Better Roads was going to make it onto the ballot, Fresno city officials put together what they have framed as this sort of stopgap emergency, contingency legislation, their own ballot proposal that, again, they say it would help cover lost funds that without Measure C would go away. However, what the city has put together is a general tax. So even though they are promising these funds to go toward covering losses from Measure C, they can't guarantee that because it's a special tax. And part of why they've chosen that route is because a general tax only requires 50% plus one approval from voters. So it has a higher likelihood of passing. But anyway, they put this together kind of last minute as this emergency measure in case better roads didn't go on the ballot. Then when it looked like, because of Soria and Caballero, better roads would go on the ballot, Mayor Dyer had said, okay, I will not submit our paperwork to the clerk to have this go on the ballot anymore because, the mayor's been a longtime supporter of better roads. Mm-hmm. Then on the day, the actual day of the deadline to submit your paperwork to the county clerk here, the mayor and the city sent out a press release saying, actually, we are putting it on the ballot because now we're worried that maybe this won't go, like better roads won't make it onto the ballot. And, this lawsuit is being battled in court with the supervisors. Then the following week, city council members, they either needed the council president or a majority of council members, so 4, to call a special meeting where they could make the decision to withdraw their measure from the ballot. That meeting never happened because only 3 council members showed up, and you need a quorum to start a meeting. Quorum is 4 people, more than half of the council. So just by default, that measure is still going on the ballot because that special meeting didn't happen.
We're just learning about an update on the judge who will be overseeing the county's case against the measure. What do we know about that development?
Yes, so there's some new stuff there, like you said. Originally, the case was assigned to Judge Robert Whalen. However, the state of California, and specifically Rob Bonta, because the lawsuit among the several defendants is the state of California. So Bonta submitted a filing contesting Whalen's assignment to the case, arguing it should be reassigned to someone else. All the filing said was that he argues Whalen is prejudiced against the defendants in this case. That was granted. It's been reassigned to Judge Santos. But as you'll see, the Fresno Bee has reported, the county plans to challenge that as well and try to get that judge tossed to for their ties to people involved in this case. So yeah, things like we've been talking about changing hour by hour.
Well, Fresnoland reporter Julianna Morano, thanks so much for coming by and helping us understand all this.
Of course. Thank you for bearing with me. There's a lot going on.
And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR. I'm Soreath Hok. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
The fatal shooting of a teenager at a protest in Seattle has gone unsolved for 6 years.
This is open in your face. How are there no answers?
Our investigation has uncovered new evidence and witnesses who say they've never talked to police.
Did police ever call you? Not once.
Listen to We Keep Us Safe, a new true crime series on the Embedded podcast from NPR.